Parents and students are able to access the practice and training tests on the casp.org website simply by going to the URL bar and typing in www.casp.org. That's CAASPP.org. In order to access the practice and training tests, I'll simply go to this green button right here. If I hover over any of these green buttons, it gives me slightly more information than I would otherwise get simply by reading the green buttons. I'll go ahead and click on the practice and training tests button now, taking me to the online practice and training test portal. As a parent or a student, I have a couple of options here. The first option I'm going to discuss is this brown button right here. If I click here, it takes me to the test administrator and test examiner resources. And if I come down here to practice and training test user guide, I can click on this and it will give me access to the practice and training test user guide, which is 37 pages, maybe a little more information than you want to look at, but it does basically go over everything around the practice and training tests in more depth than I might go to in this particular video. I'll go ahead and close that window. As I scroll down, I'll see there's resources for the California Alternative Assessment. That test is given to 3rd through 8th and 11th graders for English, language arts, and math. And also the science test has an alternative assessment, and that is given to 5th, 8th, 10th graders at Berkeley High and 12th graders at BTech. And that is for students with moderate to severe disabilities. And you would know that your student has that because you've had an IEP meeting where the team discussed and approved the student being able to take the alternative assessment. As I keep scrolling down, there are scoring guides for the CAST, the science test. There are also scoring guides for SBA grades 3 through 8 and 11. There's also scoring guides for the alternative assessment, grades 3 through 8 and 11 as well. And there are also performance task writing rubrics. So the writing is scored by trained teachers who have gone to a variety of preparation in order to be able to be a scorer on the performance task, which is constructive response and can't be scored by computer. If I go back up here to the scoring guides for these various grade levels, let's say I pick grade 6. If I click on this, it gives me a drop down for all of the practice and or training tests that have the answer keys, answer guides, scoring guides, all available in these PDF documents. Now, if I want to take a practice test or a training test, I simply go to this green button here and click. This takes me to the login page for the practice or training tests. I will decide later which test I'm taking after I go to the sign in button, and it will light up green. Click on that and it takes me to the Is This You page, and yes, you are a guest. There's no other way to take a practice or a training test other than as a guest. So I would simply go to the grade level drop down and select my grade level. In this case, I think I'll go ahead and be a 5th grader today. So I've selected grade 5 and I go ahead and select yes. Now, there are some options here. There is the ELA practice test, which mimics the environment of the computer adaptive test without it being adaptive. So this particular test is full length. Practice tests are 30 questions long for the computer adaptive portion, just like the computer adaptive portion of the SBA is also 30 questions long. Now, depending upon your student's performance on the computer adaptive test, that will determine the level of complexity, rigor, and depth of knowledge that a student will receive on this year's first time scaffolded performance task. The performance task, again, the level of complexity is based upon the student's performance on the computer adaptive test over here. Now, there's also a math computer adaptive practice test, which is not computer adaptive. Again, it just mimics the environment of the adaptive test. 30 questions long. Same thing with the performance task for math. It is based on the level of complexity, is based upon the performance of the student on the math CAT. There are 2 math performance tasks here and only 1 ELA performance task at each grade level. Why that is, I'm not sure, but that's the way it's set up. If I scroll further down here, I'll see the Smarter Balance training tests. These are shorter. They're about 15 questions in length, and they are also mimicking the computer adaptive test. However, there's grade level bands here, so the plus side is that it's shorter. The possible downside of this is if you have a third grader who will be exposed to fifth grade questions, may not be the best for their confidence. But other than that, I can't think of any reason unless you want to go for a much shorter test. It's about half the length of the practice tests up here. I scroll further down, I see there's an alternate assessment training test for ELA and math. There is also a practice test for ELA and math. And finally, there is a computer science test, computer-based for the first time this year. It's a pilot year. What that means, like it did for the SBA 3 years ago, is that the pilot is only gathering participation rates. And then the other thing that it will probably do is the state will gather baseline data in terms of performance to adjust and adapt the test for the upcoming 17-18 school year. The way this test is set up is there's 6 fifth grade questions, a handful of eighth grade questions, and then a handful of high school questions. So depending on the grade level of your student, you can scroll through the various portions of the test to get to the right grade level for your student. Now, I'll go ahead and select a practice test. Let's say I'm going to do grade 5 ELA. I'll click on that. Here I've got some options in terms of a variety of accommodations, a variety of test settings here, something like text-to-speech. There's permissive mode in case the student has speech-to-text and has Dragon software or something like that to be able to do speech-to-text. The computer needs to be in permissive mode to allow additional software to be running at the same time as a secure browser. There's a variety of other settings here you can choose. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and go to the test. I'll select here. Now I can review my test settings and see that, yes, this is indeed what I wanted to have for my test settings. And I'll go ahead and select yes here. If those settings are not correct, I can click no, go back to the previous screen, and then select the test settings that I want and move forward from there. Now I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit. This might be a little loud, so I'm going to turn this down. This is where the student would do a sound or sound and video playback check. Students who have text-to-speech will have headphones available for the whole SBA. The idea with that is that if a student needs to have text-to-speech where they have something read to them, either the answer options and the question that's being offered, if a student is an RTI or language learner, they would have this as a possibility for an accommodation. And then the other option would be is if a student has a 504, or if the student has special needs, then those students would also have the option to have language arts passages, these story passages read to them. So I'll go ahead and click on this sound and video playback check. And the sound and the video did work, so I can go ahead and click here. And then I have some options as a student to scroll through a lot of information. One of the most salient pieces of information on here is the test site, the overview of the test site. This gives you a sense of what all the tools are, the universal tools that are available on SBA. Zooming out, zooming in, that is, you can zoom 3, 5, 10, or 20 times this year. There's also a calculator button that if the calculator tool is available on a particular math question, that tool will be lit up. Otherwise, if the calculator is not available and the student has to make calculations by hand, the calculator will not be lit up on those types of problems. The context menu is where students access text-to-speech on the passages and on the question and options. Over here, if I'm on question 30, or I'm finished with all of the constructed response pieces for the performance task, this end test button will light up. And as a student, I would click there to take me to the process for actually logging out and submitting the test. Over here, there's also a pause button. This is very important for the performance task, or even the computer adaptive test for longer items. If you're worried about losing information, if there's a power surge or some type of glitch where the computers are booted out of the system, this save button will actually be helpful. I would encourage students to save often in order to protect their information. I'm sure you have lost a document or two in your day. I know I have. Over here, there are back and next buttons, so students can scroll to previous questions they've already answered. And then the next button is only available if you've answered all the questions in the series on that page, because you cannot move forward in the test unless you've either answered all the questions or flagged a question for review. And you would flag a question for review if you're not sure of how you want to answer the question. I'm going to go ahead and begin the test now. This takes me to the first question. I know that because it's got questions 1 through 7, and I'm on 0 out of 29. So this particular passage, James Watt and the Tea Kettle, I know I'm going to answer 7 questions, and I have 29 questions to complete. Something that's a problem for some students that I noticed is taking 2 fingers on the mouse pad, scrolling up and down over the page that your cursor is hovering. If I come over here to this side, then I can do the same thing, scroll up and down. I'll see that I have 7 questions available. And from here, let's say I want to flag a question for review later. I'm not sure how the first paragraph affects the plot, and I'm not sure which 2 choices. I might be sure of one of the choices, but not both. I might not be sure of either of them. I simply come over here to the context menu, click on this drop down. If I had text to speech, I could have this passage read. The answer choices and the question option read to me. Same thing over here on this side. If I do the context menu here, if I had text to speech available for passages as a student with special needs or a student with a 504 plan, I'd be able to select it there. Everyone has access to this universal tool, Mark for Review. I click here, it marks the question for review. I answer all 6 other questions. This 6th question here, I'm not quite sure about, so I'm going to mark it for review. So when I get to question 29 and I finish, the End Test button lights up over here. When I click on the End Test button as a student, what it does it will take me to the page that shows me all of the questions that I have flagged for review. I will have to go through and remedy the situation on each one of those questions that I have flagged before I can move forward to the submit and log out portion and finish the test. That's about all I can think of to cover on the practice test for ELA. I'm going to go ahead and leave this window here, and I think we're done.